Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a well known medical doctor, a researcher, and an author from Sydney, Australia, Dr. Hosen Kiat. Hosen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash. I call you Ash.
Please, absolutely.
Okay.
Dr. Kiat is the world's top 1% medicine researcher. He's got a forthcoming book which is titled Wisdom from Two Worlds, and he's a world renowned cardiologist and a nuclear medicine specialist. So, Hosen, my first question: what first drew you to the field of medicine, specifically cardiology? Was there a defining moment or a mentor early in your career that set you on this path?
Ash, I wish I had,
Hmm.
but it's a lot more boring than that. Yeah, I did my high school in Melbourne. I grew up in Jakarta, went to Melbourne at 15. During those days, if you happen to be in the top, say, 1% as a science student, you're expected to do medicine.
Hmm.
And, that's all I did. I didn't even do biology as a subject. I
Hmm.
just did maths and pure applied maths, chemistry, physics, English literature.
Hmm.
And I just, went along with it. And it was lucky that I truly enjoyed medicine. But otherwise, I wish I had an aha moment.
Hmm.
I wish I had a noble awakening, but I didn't.
You know,
Now,
you're so right about uh, from this part of the world. I mean, I'm much older than you, but I remember I was also expected to become a doctor in 1975, 76, but I didn't get into medicine. But back to you.
yeah, in fact, my father at that time was very visionary. He wanted me to do computer science, but at that time, of
Hmm.
course, computer was really only sort of infancy, probably could call that, and there wasn't any push for top students to do
Hmm.
computer, and I
Hmm.
just went along with what everyone expected me to do. Now, as far
Hmm.
as cardiology, it is a little bit more colorful, thank goodness. So when I was a junior doctor, as you know, a bit like in Indian British practice, we did junior residency, registrar, internal medicine before we go into specialty. So a lot of my bosses said, "Oh, you're very good at running Code Blue team. You always look very calm.
Hmm.
You always just made the rest of the team felt calm."
Hmm.
I didn't know that, and but I really enjoyed sort of all these interventions or pushing adrenaline into the heart,
Hmm.
sucking out blood in a ruptured heart, pushing a pacemaker urgently when the heart stopped. All this high adrenaline rush, I seem to enjoy it.
Wow.
And therefore, I thought, oh, okay, then I would like to do cardiology
Hmm.
because I enjoyed this high tension environment. And
Hmm.
then all my bosses said, you're good at it. So I thought, okay.
Oh,
And that's
fascinating.
how I ended up that way. Again, it
Amazing.
wasn't a very sort of visionary thought at all. Yeah. Very
Fascinating.
self-serving, in fact, I thought.
Fascinating. Thank you. What a great response. And you're also among the top 1% of the clinical medicine researchers globally. What drives such sustained excellence over so many years?
Um, Probably because I was born with a curious trait.
Hmm.
I always had a lot of questions as a child and as a student. And it just so happened medicine is truly our body.
Hmm.
It's truly among the most complex knowledge base that anyone could learn. It's
Correct.
just so complex. There's so many questions,
Hmm.
and it just fit my personality. And research is truly, by definition, trying to answer a question
Hmm.
in a systematic manner, as you
Hmm.
know. It's just a logical progression of my curiosity, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I enjoyed getting a question, a challenge, a patient coming with a certain condition, And I thought, oh, I should learn about it more. And
Mm.
research gave me that foundation.
Very interesting. Then you also decided to look at, integrating Eastern healing traditions with Western medical science. What was the inspiration to bridge these two very different lines of medicine? And clearly you enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, Ash, there's a saying, roughly, that the more you know you don't know.
Correct.
And so you wanted to know
Mm,
more.
mm,
The more I research and practice Western medicine, the
mm,
more I realize there's a lot that I can't do using Western medicine. There
mm.
has to be something else. And Western medicine, as you know, Ash, modern Western medicine anyway,
Yeah.
about 150 years or so, is
Mm,
very good at acute disease. You
mm,
have pneumonia, you get antibiotics, you survived. You have acute heart attack, we open it up with a stent, acute surgery, you survive. We
mm,
have brilliant ICUs. But when it comes to my 78-year-old patient with chronic back pain, but with
mm,
a heart condition, but I want him to move, to exercise, but he couldn't because he's got severe back pain all the time.
mm,
But Western medicine that I could offer couldn't deal with that. He couldn't get enough OxyContin, he couldn't get enough Tramal
mm,
painkillers,
mm,
and his neurosurgical approach failed. So I just realized that, yeah, there are gaps here in the Western medicine
mm,
that
mm.
I install in the sense.
Yeah.
But then I was born in Indonesia. I saw that the traditional medicine we
Mm,
have there is a lot more preventative. The Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, the
mm,
Jamu, traditional Indonesian medicine, they're a lot more preventive in approach instead of curative or treatment in
mm,
approach. And it is amazing that if you look at, when I grew up, every time someone gets sick, we get a ginger hot brew, we get a turmeric hot brew, and only now we know in Western medicine these are highly anti-inflammatory.
mm,
They're very good when you have a lot of inflammation and so on.
mm,
And for example, as a child, I used to peek through the hole of the keyhole. My grandfather, totally naked in the 70s or so, like he was about 70 years old. He was in a lotus position, meditating every afternoon for an hour.
mm.
And I had no idea what that was for. But now, as you know, Western medicine has explored this meditation
Correct.
uh, treatment in the sense for prevention
Mm.
so extensively. Now, Western medicine embraced it. So all these
Interesting.
things, yeah. My grandmother, she used to have a little acupuncture on somewhere around here by my
Mm,
cousin. Every
mm,
night before she goes to bed, she has
mm.
got some neck pain or something. She couldn't sleep. So this little acupuncture for a few minutes put her to have a good night rest
Wow.
every night. Now, acupuncture at that time had no research yet. But now there's so much research on
Correct.
acupuncture,
Correct.
and we realize that they work. Now, to me, if she were to take Xanax or OxyContin for neck pain,
Mm.
there's a lot more side effects for her to go to sleep than a little needle for a few minutes. So
Absolutely.
all these things gave me that background of the fact that there are other medicine which are not alternative in their own cultures.
Mm.
And yet we call them alternative. They shouldn't be.
Correct.
They're
Absolutely.
just complementary. They're
Correct.
not alternative.
Correct.
And that's why I feel that my journey for the last couple of decades is trying to bridge this East and West
Mm.
to make people understand that validated, evidence-based complementary medicine
Mm.
works.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And, I agree with you on Ayurveda and the traditional Chinese medicine, but you also use Tai Chi or Ganoderma lucidum. Uh, how do these contribute to modern preventive cardiology?
Well, Tai Chi, there's been a lot of literature in Chinese scientific literature.
Mm,
But over the last 4 or 5 years, I have had a postdoc with National Institute of Complementary Medicine
hmm
in Australia. Incidentally, for the last 2 years, we have a professor from a uh, All India Institute of Ayurveda,
hmm
AAIA.
hmm
Yeah, Dr. Raja Gopala, he was
hmm
appointed as Professor Ayurveda at our National Institute of Complementary Medicine here in
hmm
Sydney, through Ministry of
Ayush.
Ayush,
Yeah,
yeah, Ayush.
yeah, yeah.
Is that, I guess, is that A for Ayurveda?
hmm
Is that right? Yoga and homeopathy
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Siddha medicine, Unani.
Siddha, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
Unani,
I
absolutely.
yeah. Um, so she she has been doing Tai Chi
Mm,
research, and we've been doing it several randomized clinical trials to look at the added benefits of Tai Chi
mm,
on top of traditional cardiac rehabilitation program
mm,
in post-cardiac event patients
mm,
and showed that they added further benefits in biomarkers plus quality of life.
mm,
And it's not surprising because Tai Chi is movement, but it is a movement that also incorporates some psychological calmness and probably a feeling of,
mm,
I guess, peace. And as you know, that this de-escalation of adrenergic state is
mm,
very, very good for heart health.
mhm,
And so we have published a few papers, and that's why I feel that it is one of the most suitable for older people
mm,
who can continue to be agile, just like my grandfather was. How many 70-year-old patients of mine, if I were to think about it, can be sitting in lotus position for an hour every afternoon meditating? I would say less than 1%. But in India, in a lot of part of Asia, there are many people who can do that. And
mm,
that sort of agility is for sure part of the good health strategy.
mm,
And therefore, yes, I'm very much into yoga, Tai Chi, uh, that sort of safe exercise program.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
And
Very interesting.
Ganoderma lucidum is a very, in a sense, there's so many mushrooms that I could study. It just so happened I had an opportunity to study Ganoderma lucidum, and it has got a very, very good literature to back it up as an immune modulating agent to help immunity and support metabolism. So that's why I went into that. And again, I think that's where the strength of the prevention is in traditional medicine, is that the sustainability of taking something that has no side effects for a long time to prevent illness instead of to treat illness.
Amazing. You're one of the few people I've spoken to who's such a well-known cardiologist and yet has explored so much of the other options available like TCM and Ayurveda and Tai Chi and yoga. But I wanted to ask you, how has your perspective on healing evolved over the years? What do you believe is the future of personalized integrative medicine?
Well, yes, medicine should always ultimately be personalized.
Correct.
Public health is very important.
Mm,
However, when it comes to your own strategy for good health, it is your own package. Everyone
mm,
is different. Everyone has different knee pain, ear problems, etc. So personalized medicine has to be always the ultimate end medicine,
mm,
then more and more from the genetics development in medicine to very much the understanding of personally knowing who you are, we
mm,
can then develop your own exercise program, your own diet program,
mm,
your own medical prevention program.
mm,
And that's ultimately has to be the most optimal medicine we should practice.
mm,
And to me, it doesn't matter where the supplements, the medicines, the device comes from, whether it comes from the east, the west, the south, as long as it is evidence-based and it fits you, I will support it. Of course, it has to be ethical as well, and
correct, correct.
that's
Absolutely.
part of my practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But Doc, tell me, what role does emotional and spiritual well-being play when it comes to heart health and other forms of getting patients to get well?
Yeah, and again, this is the other contrast between so-called East and West. Um, in my book, Wisdom from Two Worlds,
Mm,
I shared the story of when I was in a bit of trouble. Um, I was seeing a pharmacopsychiatrist, a psychotherapist, a psychologist in Beverly Hills at that time. I was at Cedar Sinai then. I was sharing that there is a specialty in psychiatry for everything, you know. So there's so many different
mm,
psychiatrists in different fields.
yeah.
They're all into trying to treat you.
Mm,
But if you look at the traditional, whether it is in the blue zones in Asia, when I grew up, my grandfather and grandmother's home is always open. We go in, we go out, we play. Everyone is connected. There is no secrets. It's that connectiveness is so much preventative in
mm,
health because then no one is isolated.
mm,
Everyone just, yeah, your friends will come in and then before you know it, they've gone again and
mm,
it's and yet Western society is now so
mm,
nuclear based, so isolated, so siloed. And that's why so many psychiatric issues come because of this isolation.
mm,
And many research. And one of the most important one that I recently reviewed was this 10,000 government employees in Israel. They followed them up for 20 years, and they showed that if you go to religious places, obviously mainly synagogues, then you tend to live better and longer. But when they put in the connectiveness, the social aspect of going to synagogue or going to religious places into the equation, in fact, the religion itself falls out. It's more like the fact that
mm.
religion, connect you. We go to church, we go to
Correct.
synagogue, we go to temple, we meet people, and so on.
Mm,
And that's very important. And definitely, Ash, chronic stress and anxiety increase the risk of heart disease by about
mm.
70%.
Wow.
Okay. Depression increases your risk of heart disease by twofold, 200%.
Wow.
But if you have both
Mm,
anxiety and depression, you increase your risk of developing heart disease in about 10 years follow-up by 300%, threefold.
my goodness.
Okay. Now, this was done in over 430,000 British participants from the UK Biobank database study.
Hmm.
The very powerful
Yeah.
data to prove that yes, psychological risk factor is just as potent as physical risk factors such as
Mm,
obesity or high blood pressure, etc. Yeah.
mm.
And
That's
lastly, spirituality is what I
mm,
call faith. Faith, by definition, as is really believing in something without needing proof.
Hmm.
And that gives you hope. And certainly hope is one of the most important anchors in feeling at peace. Yeah.
Amazing. You spoke about your book a few minutes ago, and I was going to ask you about your book, Wisdom from Two Worlds. Tell me a little bit more about your book, Doc. Has it been released, or when is it likely to come, so that my viewers and listeners can get an opportunity to read it?
Yeah, it's being published in the States, should be out in November,
Mm-hmm.
later this month, I hope. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
probably late this month. Yeah, so it's just being published now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and hopefully it will be available everywhere in
Yeah.
Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
our website, drkiat.com, etc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I know this book, must have, will probably talk about your own journey and how much you have learned. But can you share one story from your book that deeply resonates with you?
Yeah. I talk about how I was a son and a cardiologist for my dad
Mm,
when I had to conduct or be the leader of the resuscitation team in an ED way after his cardiac arrest.
mm,
Yeah, and that was to me very much resonated that I was a cardiologist doing the code blue on my dad, telling all the doctors, nurses to to give this lidocaine infusion to take another blood oxygen level, etc.
mm,
But
mm,
then the son in me obviously was struggling to cope with the situation.
mm,
Uh, it truly dawned on me at that time. I wish he would have looked after himself 10 years
mm,
ago.
mm,
Then I wouldn't be standing here doing this. More or less, I
mm.
was like
Yeah.
blaming him that, gosh, I wish you would have done all your
Mm.
prevention so
Yeah,
that I don't have to be in this other situation.
absolutely.
Yeah, and that was very,
Absolutely.
yeah, very, very tough, that one, because
Absolutely.
I just sort of, in the sense that I was like saying, why didn't you do this?
Mm,
So
mm,
yeah.
mm,
And so now I always tell people the best time for prevention probably have passed for you, say James.
mm,
But I said to him, but the second best time is now
mm,
with me right
mm,
now today. We
mm.
can start today
Absolutely.
because when you have to treat your heart attack or treat your stroke, it's a bit too late. It's best to start
Very
a
interesting.
bit earlier than that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Doc, I have
Yeah.
time for two more questions for you.
Mm.
Uh, you often speak about living longer, stronger, and more meaningful lives. What does meaningful life mean to you?
Yeah. I always um, try to impart uh, what I could do for myself
Mm,
to try to see if I could do for my patients.
mm,
To me, if I am healthy,
mm.
I can almost do anything I want
Correct.
legally. But if I'm not healthy, even if you got $1 million today, you probably can't spend it in a
Correct.
sense. Okay.
Correct.
And so the other thing that I notice is if I just focus in keeping my patients healthy and well, they
Mm,
move well, they can eat well, there is a higher probability that they'll live longer. So I
mm,
don't have to focus in making them to live longer. My
mm,
focus is to help them to move, to help them to sleep well, to help them not to be too stressed,
mm,
to help them understand what good nutrition is for them. If if I can do that with them, chances are they will help themselves to live longer.
mm.
And to me, that's a meaningful life
mm,
because once you have that health, I don't care what they do with that health. They can
mm,
climb the Himalayas. They can, I don't know, they can just do whatever.
mm,
As long as, it's legal, that's fine with me.
mm,
So the longevity concept should have the focus on keeping the patient healthy one moment at a time.
mm,
It is a long-term investment that has to be done one day at a time.
mm,
And in so doing, then you would maximize the likelihood of longevity.
Amazing. And my last question, you already partially answered it, but I'm going to ask you this in any case. If you could revisit your younger self at the start of your medical journey, what wisdom would you share with my viewers and listeners today?
I usually share this with my younger doctors or younger students.
Mm,
The acronym is RICE, RICE. I guess I'm Asian.
yeah.
So, um, basically, resilience to me is something that the sooner you develop that trait to
Mm,
be resilient to adversity is good. So if one of my researchers, the paper got knocked back and
mm,
they got upset, they started crying,
mm,
it's fine. I would then work with them
mm,
to rewrite the paper, etc. And by doing that, gradually they develop that resilience.
mm,
Being inspirational to me is so important because you can always inspire others to do better things for themselves.
mm,
And to me, I try to do like be my own example to them. So like I would be always the first to come to a ward round. And so my students, will say, wow, it's really inspiring that the boss will be always the
yeah.
first instead of we,
Yeah.
the students, waiting for you.
Mm,
And to me, that's important because then one day they'll do it themselves. And certainly curiosity, to me,
mm,
the most important thing about you living longer is to be curious because then your mind keeps working all the time.
mm,
And the curiosity generally, Ash, will help you to develop purpose because when you're curious, then you want to find answers and you
correct.
find a purpose.
Correct.
And the last one is truly to live ethically. This
Mm,
is so important as a doctor because I've seen so many doctors go astray
yeah. Yeah.
and practice unethical
Mm,
medicine. Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's the rice. Yeah.
Fascinating. And on that note, Doc, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been for me and for my viewers and listeners. I just love your acronym RISE, which is resilience, inspirational, curiosity, and ethical. Thank you, Doc, for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. Thank you for everything that you've done for so many people, not just from the perspective of being a cardiologist and being at the top of your research, but also integrating so many other knowledge factors that exist in our part of the world, if I can use, between traditional Chinese medicine, between Indonesia, between India, and so many other factors that we have not been able to factor in a lot of the Western medicine. Thank you again for speaking to me, Doc, and all the very best to you.
Thank you, Ash. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.